tell in the old part of town. There are stories that refuse to fade away. They just get heavier with each passing year, like a damp fog that never quite lifts. One of these stories is about someone living beneath the streets, not someone. They say it's a shadow that breathes with the tunnels, listening to the footsteps of the city above. On those nights when the street lamps hum and the wind snakes through the alleys, if you listen closely, you might hear a strange, wet tapping sound from below the pavement. It's as if the city itself is answering a secret language spoken in the dark. Over time, the city learned not to ask too many questions. Small things would go missing. Sometimes a dog would vanish from its yard without a trace. Other times a stroller might be found, but it would be empty, its wheels still spinning. The only clues left behind were unsettlingly normal: a single shoe with its laces still tied, or a child's whistle, now silent. No one dared to connect the dots. It was easier to look away, to forget. But then an old woman, her voice a dry whisper, said the words everyone feared. He's back, and he's angry again. One stormy night, an old man, smelling of river mud and pure terror, stumbled into the local police station. He was clutching a cracked flashlight, his hands shaking so badly he could barely hold it. At the cemetery wall he stammered, his eyes wide with fright. "The drain, it breathes." I heard it. It wasn't human, and it wasn't an animal. It was something in between. He took a ragged breath, his voice trembling. "I saw a shadow, huge and crooked. And whatever it is, it hates the light." Detective Hale wasn't a man who believed in ghosts or monsters. He believed in evidence, in things you could touch and measure. But the old man's voice carried a weight that was hard to dismiss. On the wall of his office hung a map of the city as underbelly, a web of blue veins showing the sewer tunnels. Hale looked at the map, then at the terrified old man. He picked 3 of his most level-headed officers, men who didn't scare easily. Rope, chalk, thread, and silence. He commanded, his voice firm. "We're going down." The manhole cover lifted with a heavy, metallic groan, releasing a gust of cold, damp air that crawled up their faces like the breath from a long-forgotten room. The ladder leading down was slick with grime, and each rung felt like a step into the unknown, a promise that couldn't be broken. Below, the city spoke a different language. The constant drip, drip of water counted seconds, while the old pipes hummed a low, mournful tune no instrument could ever replicate. Their flashlights cut through the oppressive darkness, carving out narrow corridors and giving the shadows sharp, menacing edges. As they ventured deeper, they started finding signs of a life lived below. It was a bizarre nest of discarded items, objects that didn't belong in the sewers. Bottle caps were arranged in perfect spirals. Faded photographs were glued to pieces of tin. Names were chalked onto the brick walls with such force that the dampness couldn't erase them. "It's like he's collecting the city's forgotten memories," one of the officers murmured. Hale's flashlight beams slid across deep gouges in the mortar, angry arcs carved into the stone. These weren't accidents. They were marks of pure rage, a story of something monstrous waiting in the darkness below. Suddenly, the thin thread we tied to the wall trembled. It wasn't the wind. Something was moving nearby. We all froze in place. Up ahead, we could hear the faint whisper of flowing water. But behind that whisper, a slow, deliberate tapping began. It sounded like thick fingers tapping on steel. Hale, our leader, silently mouthed the word left. We followed, turning into a new tunnel. We entered a circular chamber, where four large drains converged like a twisted knot. In the center sat a rusted platform, and on it were neat, almost ritualistic collections of junk, scraps of cloth, old receipts, and food wrappers. The air was thick with a sour, wet smell. At the edge of the platform lay a crust of bread with a single shallow bite taken out of it, as if someone had tried to remember how to eat but couldn't quite manage. Then, at the far end of the chamber, something decided to stand. It wasn't a sudden step, but a slow, deliberate choice to rise. Hale lifted his flashlight, and the beam cut through the darkness, landing on a grotesquely large man. He was wide, swollen, and heavy-set, with a hump that rose like a small hill under his torn clothes. One of his arms hung low and was abnormally huge, while the other was short and tense. His crossed eyes caught the glare of our light and flinched away. His teeth flashed in the beam. They were half human, half robot. He breathed like a furnace, trembling with an unspoken fury. "Stand still," Hale commanded, his voice steady. But the creature was already standing perfectly still. The light hit its wandering eyes, and its head tilted, not with fear, but with a confused rage. When it finally spoke, its voice was a horrifying scrape, like metal being dragged across stone. "Why, you come here." The words echoed off the damp walls, mocking us. "Here, here, here." The creature took a single, dragging step forward. Its shorter leg thudded against the concrete like a hammer, yet its balance was surprisingly steady. Its larger hand slammed onto a nearby support beam, and we heard the iron dent under the force. "This, my city," it growled, the words vibrating through the chamber. "My pipes, my breath, you up there." Its anger was palpable. "We're here for the missing," Hale said, his voice firm. The word "missing" seemed to cling to the walls, hanging in the stale air. The creature stiffened at that. "Missing, not yours," it snarled. Hale signaled for us to spread out, creating a wider circle around it. The creature's chest heaved, and the entire chamber seemed to shake with its rage. But it didn't run. Monsters run. This was something different. This was an angry thing, and angry things choose where to stand. It chose to move forward. With a roar, its huge arm shoved the central platform. The old pipes groaned in protest, and the thin thread we had used as a guide snapped. We were trapped. A side tunnel opened up to our left. The creature moved towards it with surprising speed, its uneven legs finding a balance learned from years of crawling through these iron tunnels. Hale gave chase, and the sounds of splashing water, heavy breathing, and pounding heartbeats folded into one another. At the end of the passage was a rusted gate. Inside, Hale shouted to us. Outside, the creature roared back, kicking the wall beside the gate. The old bricks groaned under the impact. We found ourselves in a low concrete bay. The creature hunched beneath the low ceiling, its hump casting a shadow that looked like a twisted hill. Its front teeth gleamed, and its eyes drifted apart, one staring into our light, the other lost in the darkness. "You won't stay here," Hale said, his voice echoing in the confined space. The creature answered with a furious snarl that rattled water droplets from the ceiling. It crouched low, one long arm spread wide, ready to attack. Hale gave the signal. We threw the cable net we had brought not to kill, but to restrain. It caught his thick leg, and the tension pulled him off balance. He lunged forward, but his large hand snagged the rusted gate, tearing a chunk of metal clean off. He bellowed, a sound of pure wrath that filled the air with heat. "Look," Hale said suddenly, pointing his light at the cracked brick wall. Scrawled in chalk were names. "You wrote these." The creature turned, its heavy breathing thickening. It stared at one name as if the word itself had bitten him. A low growl rose from its chest, sound of pure hatred, not grief. "Enough," Hale ordered. We moved in, bound the creature, and began the difficult task of dragging him towards the ladder back to the surface. He was huge, heavy, and unbalanced, but with all of us, he was movable. Each rung of the ladder groaned under his weight, as if the city itself was protesting his removal. Above, the city night hummed, and the manhole coverside shut behind us. An old man who had warned us was waiting by the curb, his flashlight now dead. He wasn't praying, he just muttered, "Told you." The creature's chest rose and fell with a fury that was meant for the daylight world. The city offered only silencer, silence that seemed to ask, how long can something live in darkness before light itself becomes an insult? At dawn, Hale filled out his report. Identification, unknown. Build, grotesquely large, heavy-set, asymmetrical. Features, hump on back, one leg shorter, right arm longer and stronger. Eyes crossed, front teeth elongated. Behavior hostile. He didn't write the word monster. He wrote just one word. Danger. The city will turn this into a legend. People will argue over the details and redraw the shadow's face to match their own fears. But that night, our town learned something simpler. Beneath the world we think is ours, there is anger, just waiting for a place to stand. And if you ever find yourself walking alone at night and hear a wet tapping sound from beneath the street, just keep walking. Not because there's nothing there, but because there is. And you, Dan T., want to know what its eyes look like when the light finally hits them. Thanks for watching. And if you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like and subscribe for more.